Welcome back. So today I want to talk about how the education system is ruining the lives of young men. And this goes back to the last video where I was talking about how parents don't pay enough attention to their kids and how this ruins them. And I talked a little bit about how I filed a Freedom of Information Act request with the Denver Public Schools to get the curriculum. And they said that it was owned by a private company and that they couldn't give it to me. And I actually have the email here so I can put it on the screen. But that's one thing. I mean, we could start off right there. Do you think that the people that actually want to make it so difficult for you to find your child's curriculum care about your child? And I'd say that it's irresponsible for parents who know that there might be something going on within their schools to not try to get the curriculum from their schools any way possible. I spent about a month trying to get that curriculum, emailing them multiple times, and they were just giving me curriculum guides, which were not actually the full curriculum, and it was just portions of the curriculum. So I emailed them multiple times, and eventually they gave me that response saying that they couldn't give it to me because it was owned by a private company, which just seems pretty weird that a public school would have curriculum owned by a private company. That's very strange to me, but not surprising at the same time. So if you don't have your child's curriculum, then you need to get it. If you can't get it, then you shouldn't send your child to that school if you have the possibility not to. Because chances are that if people want to hide the curriculum, they're probably not teaching your kids things that they should know. And they're making your kids' lives worse. Another thing that I noticed while I was in school is that history is completely incorrectly taught. If you actually read any real history, such as history about slavery or the Civil War, for example, which people tend to talk a lot about, especially because Black Lives Matter and things like that, they tend to focus on slavery so much. When you actually read into things like that, you can look into what kids are being taught in schools and realize that the information is not only completely biased, but also completely false. And it's also very vague. And I think going along with the whole history aspect, I think we can all agree that most boys are way more inclined to learning history than most girls are. And I think part of that is because we try to look for the awesome, great men throughout history who did unbelievable things because it's cool to us and we look up to those men. What do schools do, though? What do schools do to our heroes, to the great men? They try to ruin their image and destroy them. For example, think about the founding fathers. If you go to any school, could be in New York, could be in Texas, could be in California, could be in Idaho, you know what they're going to say? They're going to say how they were evil white men who were slave owners. That's what they're going to say. So the boys in that class will be unable to find their heroes. And because of that, they're led to believe that there are no heroes left. There are no great men. And they don't think it's impossible for men, young men nowadays, to, without understanding how things work, it's impossible for them to find men to look up to without believing the whole fake narrative of all your heroes from let's say 70 years ago, past that in history, were all evil white men, disgusting. They hated women, they hated black people. It's all that. And anyone who doesn't believe me, that's fine. You don't have to. I had a channel with almost 6,000 subscribers in which I talked about first my experiences in school, and I'll put some screenshots up on screen about some things that I saw in the public school I went to for 2 months at the middle of 2020, I believe. As soon as I got that channel to grow, I started getting emails from not just parents but kids from across the country talking about their experiences in school. And again, this was in New York, California, many in Texas, which everybody goes, well, there's nothing in Texas, which is a complete lie, because people don't pay attention. Texas, Oklahoma, some in Iowa, Illinois, of course, because of Chicago, and tons of other places. Tennessee. Name any state in the United States, and there were tons of stories and tons of emails from kids and parents. Canada as well. And they would send me screenshots and tell their stories about these things that they saw in school. And it was everywhere. And you might even say, well, yeah, that was 2020 when everything was crazy and there was all that Black Lives Matter stuff. Yes, there was that, but it hasn't gone away. I mean, the BLM stuff has gone away for the most part, but it'll come back, and everything other than that is still going to be there. I think one of the best men who ever talked about how useless school is, how useless the education is nowadays, was John Taylor Gatto. And unfortunately he's dead now, but he wrote multiple books about how the education system completely failed kids. And most people don't understand how the education system was started in America either. They have no idea. And, you know, I don't think it's unreasonable for people not to know this because, again, like I said in the last video, well, my parents went to schools, and their parents went to school, and their parents went to school, so it only makes sense for me to go to school. That's most people's train of thought. Because they don't think to actually look into things. They just go, if everybody else is doing it, then I should do it too. So, I believe it was at the end of the 1700s or 1800s. I'm not completely sure. But it started in Massachusetts, and a group from the government was trying to get these kids in that area to go to school, to force them to go to school. And eventually the parents started fighting back with guns. Because if someone's going to take away your child for 7 hours a day, force you to, then obviously you're going to fight back. Unless you're used to it. And unless you are threatened with being arrested and going to prison for not sending your child to school. So these parents fought back, and then years later they gave up. And they started letting their kids go to school. That's how it all started. Now, do you think the people who started it and are continuing it are really, really trying to do this for your child? Do you think they really want to educate you? There are good teachers, for sure. I've had a couple good teachers. But the majority of teachers are the most disgusting people on the planet. Seriously. And most people go, whoa, that's too much. No. I've done my research. I've looked into these teachers. I paid attention to who my teachers were. I paid attention to what they said and what they did. I paid attention to who they picked on and who they didn't. They are disgusting people. And most people won't admit that. Because they go, well, they're just doing their job and, you know, they get underpaid. Imagine working that long, all the time. Yeah, plenty of people do it. And they do much better things with their time. if you think about how much time teachers spend actually talking about things that they know and actually educating people, it's basically no time out of the day. Basically none. They read from a book that tells them exactly what to do. They put up a little slideshow, maybe make you read a book, or they have you go around the class and you all read a book, or you do one of those, I forget what it's called. It's like some sort of seminar or something where you all sit in a group and talk about a book or some specific topic. They're all reading from a textbook. That's not coming from their mind. So they're teachers, not educators. They're just teaching you something that they are reading about, but most of them don't care. Especially today, most of them don't care. And I think that would be hard for a lot of people over the age of 35 to hear, because I think there were a lot more good teachers back then. But nowadays, kids have a really bad pick. And I shouldn't even say pick, because they don't get to choose. They do not get to choose. And I think another thing that we know is that young men are much worse off in the education system than young women are. Because if you put young men in a place for 7 hours every day, where they're told to sit still, be quiet, not be crazy, and do that for such a long period of time every day, over and over and over again, and you tell them that we're going to learn this is just the truth, that's the truth, you have to learn it, you have to take these 3 steps to do this in class today, and then you're done. You tell that to a young man, he's not going to do that, at least not very well, because why should he care? And plus, he wants to do other things. He wants to at least go outside or do something, especially with younger kids, go outside for recess. And this isn't necessarily a bad thing with young women or with women in general, but when you tell women that they need to get from point A to point B, and these are the steps to take it, and this is what we're learning today, this is what we're doing, then they just go, okay, and they go along with it, especially when they're taught to do that at a young age. And it's not that all women are like that, but more women are like that today because they are taught to be that way at such a young age. So, yeah, most young men, I would say all young men who are in the education system, public or private, are being ruined because of it. And people don't understand that because they don't pay attention. I mean, when I had all that content, I don't remember how many videos I made, and I don't remember when I stopped either, but when I had all that content, there was so much more out there. There were countless stories of not only politics in school, but just stories of how school is not helping kids. Take out the politics. School is not helping kids at all. And you could make a 10-hour documentary about it. It would be very boring because it would basically just be the same story over and over again, because all public schools are basically carbon copies of one another. And that's the other problem, is that kids are all taught to be carbon copies of one another. They're not supposed to be individuals. And when the government wants to teach your kids, they're probably not doing it they are not doing it for your children. They're doing it for them. Anyway, kind of a long video, 14 minutes. Guess about the same as Monday's video. But I thought this was important to talk about. I put some of those screenshots on the screen to show you how, I believe the pictures were about some of my teachers. One of the principals was wearing a BLM shirt, and the English teacher was wearing a BLM shirt, and how the teachers had their pronouns in their bio, their Zoom bios, and some other weird things like the genderbread man, which people will laugh, but it's actually scary because these people take it seriously and they're willing to teach your kids that. And when you have weak men, they're willing to believe anything. And that's the other thing. When you have weak men and you have these women today that are taught to be strong, independent women that don't listen to men, that think men are trash. When you have these women, who lots of them are attractive, but they still believe that, when you have these women looking at all this curriculum and believing it, what do you think the weak men do? They go along with it. And they delude themselves into actually believing it, even though they might not. Or at very least accepting it. So it completely destroys everything. It's a cycle of destruction. And there's so many different points with this. But I think people need to understand, especially parents need to understand, that if you do not have your child's curriculum, you need to get it. Because it will ruin them unless they have a strong moral compass. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video as much as you can. And I hope you guys got something out of it. And I will see you guys next time.